Scottish Parliament after listening to the Peace March with somebody who I've been looking forward to speaking to, who is the leader of a smaller party in Scotland. Is it a British party?
No, Scottish only.
Scottish party.
Scottish only.
So I was trying to get sovereignty when I was interviewing the other leaders before the last election, trying to get sovereignty to speak doing the 3 hours discussion with me to find out policy, where they are in the political spectrum, and I'm looking forward to actually speaking to David. I've agreed to actually do that. We'll do some sort of online Skype or Streamlabs or something like that to actually do a 3 hour discussion, and we'll see where they are in the political spectrum and we'll have a chat. I don't really know much about it, David, so maybe it would be beneficial just now if you just tell us what sovereignty actually stands for and where they approximately are. We'll go into much more detail, but where they approximately are on the political spectrum, what your beliefs are as a party.
Yeah, so if we're known for anything, it is our position on the Constitution, as together with the Scottish Libertarians, we're one of only 2 parties that are double out. So we would like Scotland to actually be independent. That means being independent of both the United Kingdom and the European Union.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, you got my vote already. What I was going to say, I spoke to Tam just recently outside the Scottish conference, the Scottish National Party's conference, and he said that you have sort of pacts sometimes, you and Tam as well. What's why would you not just join with Tam and the SLP? What's the difference, or the thing that you would require a separate party from Tam's party?
Well, we have members who would self-describe as libertarians. It's by far it's the minority. There are people from various different classical political traditions. And we as a party would be, I would tend to say, probably be a little bit more right on culture and definitely more left on the economy compared to the libertarians. So
right in culture and left on
economic questions.
Oh, right.
So for instance, we're a little bit more relaxed about things like welfare, government benefits, and so on. But ultimately, what we've always said on any question of public spending is the books have to balance.
Interesting.
Yeah, the government can't spend money it doesn't have, and it should spend out of its current resources instead of doing this intergenerational transfer where it takes money from the future to pay the present, and that's what we have going on in this place.
I think you actually might be closer to me, because Tam, I was speaking to Tam about this, and Tam is an anarcho-capitalist, so which means I would say Tam is actually literally far right, but it's not far right as other people would describe it. It's a totally economically far right. In fact, is that far right? They might have things in common with the anarcho-communist, anarcho-syndicalist. It's quite weird. The two could actually marry up. You actually might be closer to me, and I might be setting up a political party. What I am is a libertarian liberal. So I'm a centrist libertarian. So Tam and I, because Tam is of the anarcho-capitalist right, he has to move to the left, which is the minarchist right. And even the minarchist is, I'm probably more similar to you then, David, where I believe in a state, but a smaller state.
And look, we would like to see some of the massive wastage of government spending cut back. And I would say very much, I don't know if Tam listens to this.
He does.
I would say the differences aren't maybe as great as I'm pointing out, and we love the libertarians. We're looking forward to opportunities to work together with them. And 2026, if you're listening, Tam, that's an opportunity for us to get together. There actually is an informal grouping of about 5 or 6 smaller parties.
Family party.
Not the family party.
Not the family party.
Yet,
Interesting.
But it could be in the works. But
Social Democrats.
So the key driver of this, if you've been following Sovereignty's Twitter, sorry, I'm so old-fashioned. Sovereignty is X. Yeah, it sounds like an ex-wife, doesn't it? What's this? The key. Follow us on Vote Sovereignty, by the way. If you don't do anything, if you don't take anything else from this interview, go to Vote Sovereignty. That is our handle on X.
Yep.
But we met recently with, that's my deputy leader, Moira Brown, myself. We met with the Scottish leader and the UK leader of a party called Alliance for Democracy and Freedom.
Right, okay.
Dr. Tek Kong.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll speak to him very soon. I was nearly speaking to him, and I'll speak to him soon.
Super lad, shame he's a unionist, but really nice guy.
There's also the Freedom Alliance as well.
Yeah, Freedom Alliance would be another party, and a couple of other parties. And I think the idea is, we're not making a secret of this, is for each party to take between 1 and 2 electoral regions. And rather than being spread out across the country, pour all of your resources into one electoral region. And here's the kicker. Instead of only standing on the list, as your likes of Alaba did in the last election, and you saw where that got them, right? Stand in every constituency in that electoral region.
So you're going to have.
We are already committed to doing that for Highlands and Islands.
So you're going to have a 5-party confederation, and each of you are going to take a different region.
More or less, I think that's the thinking at the moment.
Well, that's very interesting.
So news for you, real news.
That is right off. I didn't know that. Yeah. That's something that I didn't even know.
Sure.
But I think that's an excellent idea. I spoke to Tam. He didn't tell us that when last time we spoke to him.
Well, Tam and I haven't spoken about it. This is very much conversation that's being led by I want to say IDF, ADF at the moment. So, so Dr. Kong's leading the charge on this one. I know they've reached out to parties like the Workers' Party of Great Britain. And we're a bit conflicted because we're a nationalist party. We want Scotland to be independent. That's our primary raison d'etre.
Right, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So an independence party, because the Libertarians are a bit soft on the independence thing. I said that they weren't as resolute on Scottish independence but outside Europe. No, sorry, they're not as resolute. They want to be outside Europe, but they're not quite as. I was asking Tam if there's going to have a referendum, Scottish independence. It was a bit woolly, politically woolly. What's Sovereignty's position on another independence referendum?
Well, we're as unwoolly as it gets. In fact, I think it's very clear at the moment that there's no referendum on the table. It's clear to me that there's no parliamentary or judicial route to independence within the UK system. And we believe fundamentally in the principle of self-determination. And the UK government, as I made as a point recently at a recent speech, the UK government has backed unilateral declarations of independence in the past, particularly in the case of Kosovo, where despite the fact that Serbia was refusing, the UK government went to the International Court of Justice and said, in sworn testimony there, they said that a UDI is legal in international law. So we intend to hold them to that.
Wow.
But we know that there has to be a democratic mandate for that. So we're being denied a referendum. As far as I can see, we'll be denied a referendum more or less indefinitely. So what is the route open to us?
I'll tell you what it is, right? It's, obviously, and I'm going to tell you what the route is just now. I think the actual long-term goal of independence, I think you have to be realistic about things. And what the route for is something. So I'm going to set up my own political party. So I'll be standing.
Come on board with us.
Well, to be honest with you, you're not really far off the politics, but it gives me an opportunity to be able to construct it. I wouldn't be opposed to that, and I certainly wouldn't if we were all elected and get away from the Lib Lab Con Party, the Greens, the wokey Wefter parties, as I call them. I wouldn't be opposed to working with you, and even later on amalgamation. That wouldn't be an issue, because I think in the policy we're both together. But the first thing that I would do, where they couldn't set up or they couldn't deny a referendum, would be to have a Devo Max referendum in the short term. So if I was a small party and we won, so say my party won and won the majority of seats in the Scottish Parliament, they can't refuse. They can refuse potentially just now because the SNP said it's once in a generation, and then didn't conduct the referendum very well. God rest Alex Salmon's memorial as well today, which was on today as well. But they didn't conduct it very well. They couldn't refuse a Devo Max referendum, and what that would do in the short term is set up the infrastructure. If an independence was to happen later, it would give all the infrastructure, so we could decide how that would look. We would still be within the UK in the short term, and it would give more institutions back to in particular economic institutions back to the Scottish Parliament, and we would then be able to start to develop our own financial services again, which has been adversely. We've lost all 9 of the life offices that were here. We lost the 3 stock exchanges that are now down in London as well. All of those will not be controlled potentially by London, and we'll be able to develop that. So I would suggest that an interim step would be a Devo Max referendum, get the powers back to control it, and then if there was a referendum, it would be much easier to go, and they wouldn't be able to refuse a Devo Max, because nobody said that we couldn't have a Devo Max in between referendum.
I think the issue you'll have is, okay, so you get your Devo Max, fine, what's the next step? What is the next step?
Well, the next step would be for somebody, if you were interested in independence, then if that was the ultimate goal. Yep. But the intervening step would be to have more political and economic powers in the Scottish Parliament. And if Westminster are going to deny it and it stops any friction, they couldn't be, and it wouldn't be and they might a Devo Max referendum might win. Whereas, because the Unionists were still in the UK, but we're now got more powers to actually control our own economics. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think ultimately the UK is still going to block that final step.
I don't think it could.
Unless certain things are put in place. So the first thing that has to happen is the desire for independence. And I recognise, looking at the polls, we're sitting at 52, 53% sometimes. And at the moment, we really need to be pushing on, making the case, winning over that next 10% of the population to independence.
Do you think the political class in here, and especially the SNP, have done a good enough job of governance since Alex Salmon, probably, from that point of view? I mean, we've had Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Useless, and they're both wanting to stay on. They're both useless.
Well, look, I think it can be a wee bit of a trap looking at it this way, because all of this behind us is happening in a union context. It's happening in parameters laid down by Westminster. Okay, so it's not, it's a little bit like, to give you an analogy from the last days of the Soviet Union, okay, there was the Latvian SSR and the control of the local Latvian Soviet system and so on. And it's like saying, well, look how badly they governed Latvia, or the Latvian SSR in the 1980s. Latvia could never be independent. And we're in that same situation. That's my belief. This is an institution that has to operate in a union context, in a union framework. So saying, okay, for instance, Sturgeon, and I agree, I mean, she messed a lot of up, lost up. She took away a lot of really fundamental liberties. And I would say Yusuf similarly did an awful lot of damage. And they are doing damage to the cause of independence because people associate them with Scottish nationalism. But let's look at the reality. Neither of them are really Scottish nationalists.
No.
Both of them want to sell us out again to a different union.
They're wokey wefters.
They're
wokey wefters.
Wokey wafers, perhaps. Wafters, is that the term?
Okay. The WEF.
Yeah.
So Wokey wafters. So
Okay.
they're basically globalists.
Yep.
They're not nationalists, they're globalists.
Sure.
And they're both Wokey, so Wokey wafters.
Yeah.
That's what they're called.
And the reality is that that's a kind of weird mix for a nationalist party. You say you're a nationalist, but you're all about selling out to
the globalists,
your country to the globalists, ultimately to Brussels.
Same as Labour, same as the Tories, same as the Liberals, same as the Greens.
Yep, 100%. So the question really for us is, there is a certain breakthrough that has to be made by anti-globalists, which and
there's an increasing number.
Absolutely. And the popular appeal of what we stand for, I believe, is evident, right? The Scottish people, ordinary Scots, are not on board with the sort of globalism that is being pushed from places like this.
Yeah.
So I think our time will come, and I think strategically we need to think about the next steps. And it may be happening in the context of the move to independence.
Yeah.
The two things can happen in parallel. So coming back to Latvia, right? It was a massive change that the country underwent in the 1980s, going from Soviet communism to the free market system and democratic elections. But it was also happening in tandem with the movement to national independence. And so those two things can work together. It doesn't have to be either or. You can have both and that's what we are standing for.
Dave, you do realise you're going to come on Guerilla TV and do a 3-hour interview with me, aren't you? You're going to do
I have to save something, right?
Yeah.
Do we have a bit of time to say a little bit about today's rally?
So we're at the Peace March and Dave spoke. You can look at it in the previous video. And Dave, just whatever you want to say, carry on.
Yeah, so I would just say, I'll speak to the camera at this point. Folks, I think we're at a really, really dangerous point in the way that things are developing with the UK and France and Ukraine, the conflict there, and with Russia. The UK has made it clear that it's determined to escalate in anticipation of Trump getting into office. And they have taken a number of steps that are highly inflammatory. We have seen, for instance, calls from France to put boots on the ground. We've seen the UK supplying Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine. That's an actual Russian red line. Okay, so you can argue about the rights and wrongs of that, and as I spoke a lot about, the historic background of it. But at this precise moment, when there is a chance of peace, when there is a chance of ending the bloodshed in Ukraine, where over 1 million Russians and Ukrainians have lost their lives needlessly, I think it's imperative that we put pressure on Starmer and his cronies in Westminster to change their course and to push for peace. Because if the UK and the US together say that this war has run its course, the war will be over tomorrow. Every day that goes by risks greater loss of life. We're hearing stories of up to sometimes even 1,000 lives lost in a single day. And it risks the possibility of escalation actually kicking off and missiles flying. And don't think that just because you're on a nice island here in Great Britain that you're immune from the possibility of missile attack. This war could get hot very, very quickly. And by that point, it will be too late to stand up and oppose what we see. So we were here today at this excellent rally. It's called We Stand for Peace. You can look them up at standforpeace.co.uk, I believe, is their website. But it's really important you get involved and let your elected representatives know that you're not on board with this and that you would like to see the British government de-escalating. But at the moment, that seems absolutely contrary to what the entire political class in the UK wants. So we'll have to wait and see. Let's see what happens over the next few months. But be prepared, because it could get very, very ugly. And I think there will be resistance here in Scotland to the idea of things like forced conscription, which have been telegraphed by the mainstream media. Senior generals in the British Army have come out and said we may need to conscript you. So this could have a major impact on your life very shortly. So time to get involved, the time to get political is now. You can check us out at sovereignty.scot or follow us at Vote Sovereignty on X. Do you want to say anything in addition to that?
No, Dave, welcome to the Guerilla TV channel.
Thank you very much.
And we'll do a 3-hour interview with you. I'll get in contact with you in the next few days, and we'll go to speak to Mr. Sheck as well. He's asked to speak as well. I'll get him on, and I'll speak to him as well. We'll do the 3-hour interview in the lead up, because depending on the budget next year and whether or not the SNP are able to pass the budget, we might see the collapse. So the election might be sooner rather than later. It might be 2025 rather than 2026, depending on whether the Greens or the Liberals or somebody else. And then Reform UK might be flourishing. We might have to get Reform UK on to actually speak to them. We're down at their conference, and we need to get people from Reform to go over what they are representing. I think. Have you got a full manifesto? Have you got,
we produced a full manifesto for both the 2021 Scottish Parliament election and the recent UK general election.
I think the Reform
and you can access both of those on our website.
And I think Reform's going to have to set up their own, because they seem to be getting a large percentage just now. And it looks like they're going to get MSPs as well. But anyway, Dave, we're going to get you on board, and we're going to do a 3-hour interview, and we'll enjoy yourselves. You'll be able to see the other ones on the Guerilla TV channel on YouTube. And I've spoke to Richard and Tam for 3 hours, and it's a very relaxed. It's not a grilling; it's just a relaxed, and we go over certain positions and certain topics as well, Dave. So I'll be looking forward to speaking to you.
It's been a pleasure and an honour, and keep up the good work.
Thanks very much, Dave. Thank you.